Not too many people on vacation. That's, different from last week, apparently. I'm talking about the 7 deadly sins that were first defined by the Catholic Church in the 6th century by Pope Gregory. They were kind of renewed, or interest was renewed when Edmund Spencer wrote The Faerie Queene, and in it he has a procession of those 7 deadly sins. And the question would be, why do we need to think about those? Well, there we go.
You're going back.
Am I? That's how I've lived my life. This passage is interesting from 1 John chapter 1. If we claim to be without sin, we deceive ourselves, and the truth is not in us. If we confess our sins, he is faithful and just, and will forgive us our sins and purify us from all unrighteousness. If we claim we have not sinned, we make him out to be a liar, and his word is not in us. So the premise behind this quotation is we do sin. Our salvation comes in asking for forgiveness. It's the failure to ask for that forgiveness that becomes the ultimate sin. Last week when Seth talked about the pastors, the priests, he talked about them as they offered second-rate offerings. They dishonored God with lame or diseased animals. They may not have thought of those as sins, and he called that a postmodern view because of the relativeness. It's not a sin unless you think so, and nothing's really a sin unless, like I said, you think so. But it's not necessarily a postmodern view. There's a quote that occurs twice in Judges, which is, everybody did what was right in their own eyes. And that's kind of postmodern. It's very relative about what we do and what we consider good and evil, and most of the time we don't consider what we do to be evil because it's all relative. So you've got that quote from John that suggests we really need to be thinking about the grace we ask for from God. What are the 7 deadly sins? Well, they're laziness or idleness, and in contrast to that is diligence. The second one is overindulgence or gluttony versus moderation. The third is lust or lechery versus chastity. The fourth, greed or avarice versus charity. The fifth is jealousy or envy versus kindness. The sixth is anger, wrath versus forgiveness. And the final one is pride. And that stands in contrast to humility. I'm going backwards again, aren't I? The first deadly sin is sloth. Now, I don't know if you've ever seen a sloth, but these guys hang around. I think it gives meaning to the idea of idleness. You're just hanging around, not doing much of anything. In fact, they spend very little time on the ground. They travel at about 90 feet an hour. They are extremely slow, hampered by those claws that are so adept at hanging on trees. They come down to the ground very seldom, and it is usually for the removal of bodily waste, and then they promptly go back up the tree. Well, why is idleness a sin? Because it's self-destructive. It leads to estrangement from God and ultimately ourselves and others. Practically speaking, it leads to poverty. If you're not doing anything, you're not going to earn money. And if you don't earn money, you can't provide for yourself, let alone others. So, that makes sense as a sin. Here are some examples. I don't like going to the dentist. And if I have a toothache, I just kind of wait for it to go away. I have one tooth that didn't go away. Had to be extracted. That cost $500. I couldn't really chew without it because it was a molar. So eventually got an implant. That cost $2,700. Then the post and the crown cost another $1,800, and now I put myself at $5,000 for want of a toothbrush. That's me. I had a radiator core in a 1972 Plymouth Scamp that was apparently faulty because what was emanating from it was green steam. Well, it wasn't too bad in the summer because I didn't have air conditioning and I didn't have to use it. But in the winter, I couldn't see after a while. So, day after Thanksgiving, my brother-in-law and I spent all day replacing this radiator core. My laziness caused us to miss a valuable day of celebration. So, idleness, not a good thing. Idleness led me not going to church from 2010 to 2015 and only sporadically from 2015 to 2019. Didn't feel like it. Hung around. I read the paper when papers were still papers and not online. That's changed for the last 3 years, but gosh, it's an effort. I'll be honest. I've missed a couple. But here I am. The second is gluttony, and I have to say it's not necessary. Whoop. There we go. I should mention these are in the order in which their procession exists. They marched in a procession from the least bad to the most bad. And gluttony is not felt as that bad, but it's pictured as a grotesquely large, overweight man riding on a fat pig. I use Porky here because he's kind of nice. This morning I was up at 1:30 thinking about this, and one of the things I read in the New York Times is we don't think of gluttony as a sin because of its causes. In the early 1970s, the rate of obesity was 13%. Now it's 42%. And the question is, why has that arisen? And the answer has to do with prepared foods and how they fail to satisfy us. People used to people used to eat vegetables from their garden, game that they killed or bought in a grocery store that wasn't pre-packaged and pre-prepared. Is that a word? Processed. That's the word, processed. Because processing adds all sorts of chemicals to it that aren't particularly good. And what happens mechanically is there's a hormone for satiety. That means your hunger's been satisfied. But it's not satisfied with processed food. And so we eat too much. I mean, I certainly do. I have taken off and put on the same 10 pounds for the last 15 years. It's just, I eat too many processed foods. So it's worth noting that while we shouldn't define it as a sin, it's overindulgence to the expense of our spirit is certainly a problem. And yet the problem, as I see it, is food is fun. Food is celebratory. I can remember being in Ohio once a year with my family, and we would eat at my grandmother's house, and she would have a turkey, a roast beef, and a ham. And if you didn't have second and third helpings, you didn't love her. And then there was dessert, and you thought you had to save room for that. You had no room, but you still ate dessert because she wanted you to think you loved her. Then when we went to my father's mother's house, and she had tocana, which is a Romanian chicken stew. Cook it all day. It's got a lot of garlic in it, but the garlic mellows out, and it was just wonderful. Go to my father's sister's house, and she made mitite, Romanian meatballs, garlic again. But they're grilled, and they are so good. I guess 2 of them would equal the patty on a Big Mac, and you usually ate 6 or 10 of them. Food is love. Food is love. And today we have drugs. We have drugs like Ozempic. And what that does is satisfy the satiety hormones so that you're not hungry. And people do lose weight on it, although they put it back on when they quit. We have bariatric surgery, and that reduces the size of the stomach so that you just can't eat as much. So we're certainly preoccupied with food. Teenage girls are preoccupied with food and their weight and their image on social media. So it becomes kind of a sin in terms of our preoccupation with it. The third one, and you've already seen it, is lust or chastity. And for some reason, it was pictured as a goat. And it was a goat with a man on it who wasn't very attractive, and yet the women all loved him. I think the goat is because of the way its eyes are. They're kind of looking out, but also looking all around. So, but I'm not sure why it's a goat. And that was the kindest image of a goat I could find. We experience with what's called clickbait. Even the News Gazette has clickbait. Clickbait of, look at Margot Robbie in her bikini. Look at Scarlett Johansson in her bikini. That kind of clickbait is kind of click on it before you see it. Here's one I enjoyed because of the sentence. Dua Lipa enjoys a romantic ice cream date with her boyfriend Callum Turner in a chic tank top and a low-waisted skirt. Now, just by the grammar, I wanted to see if he was the guy wearing the low-waisted skirt. But I didn't. I figured they knew what they were doing. There used to be a billboard as you went west. I think it was around University and 3rd, and it was Farrah Fawcett. I don't know if some of you remember the Farrah Fawcett. Yeah, you remember that? Red swimsuit, she's kind of looking to the side, just with that big smile and all those teeth. And I remember looking at that, and my wife punching me. And she said, "Don't be looking at that. What's the matter with you?" Well, I could tell you what's the matter. I couldn't help it. But every subsequent time, I made sure I was looking straight ahead. Women don't like it when men look at other women. There's a short story about that by Irwin Shaw, The Girls in Their Summer Dresses. And a husband and a wife are enjoying a cup of coffee, but he keeps glancing at all the women walking by. And finally, she gets fed up with him, and they go on to their next appointment. But the idea that he could not stop himself from looking becomes the point of the story, that he was not really going to be faithful to his wife. And men look like that. We look. There's a Jimmy Carter quote from when he was a candidate for president in 1975. "I have committed adultery in my heart." And people were shocked by that. "Oh, how could you?" As if he somehow did something that other people didn't do. But it didn't cost him the election, obviously. More seriously, Philip Yancey has a book called The Scandal of Forgiveness, and he recounts a story about a man who was planning to have an affair. And he asked Yancey if God would forgive him for what he was about to do, essentially seeking preemptive forgiveness for a planned infidelity. But Yancey asked him, "But would you want to?" The idea being that once you have committed sin, you are far less interested in God. And so his answer becomes a source of instruction for us in our divided minds. Claudius in Hamlet killed his brother and married his wife. And he tries to pray about it. He says, "What form of prayer can serve my turn? Forgive me my foul murder? That cannot be, since I am still possessed of those effects for which I did the murder, my crown, my own ambition, and my queen. May one be pardoned and retain the offense?" No. And that's what he understands as he turns away from his prayers. Fourth sin. Going backwards. Greed. Remember Scrooge McDuck? Sitting around with his piles of money and refusing to give any to his nephews. Greed is pictured as a threadbare miser riding a gold-laden camel. He won't spend money on his clothes. He won't give it away, but he's got a camel that's just weighted down with gold. There's some research that suggests after, I think this figure might be different now, but I read it recently. After $75,000, more money doesn't lead proportionately to more happiness. If you think of it as a graph from 30,000 to 75, it's probably going up. But after 75, not so much. You have about what you need. You have about what you can acquire. After that, there's a kind of excess to it, and that kind of excess can turn our spirits away from God. Here's an example. I own 6 guitars and 2 bass guitars. Why? Because I could. Came into some money after an English conference in first 1996 and again in 2002. And I bought a Fender Stratocaster. I bought a Rickenbacker 12-string. I have a Hofner bass, which the Beatles used. I mean, it looks nice.
Still not seeing the problem you're saying.
You stole my line because I was going to say this would not be a problem for Dan. The problem for me is I just don't play that well. I don't need 6 guitars. I could play on one as badly as I would play on 6. So, certain covetousness. The other example of this kind of covetousness of money is, that was 30 years ago. I took a position at Urbana High School as an administrator. Why? Because the pay increase was substantial. I think in today's dollars, it would have been about $24,000. Yeah. But, well, I could use that. Didn't really. Had enough food, had enough clothing. My kids were entertained as they needed to be. We saved some, wasted some. And by the end of the year, I realized I don't really like this work. I just don't like it. Please let me back in the classroom. Unfortunately, my former position was open, and I was able to return to the classroom. They could have returned me to, what did they call it back then? Alternative education. They could have put me in that classroom, but they didn't. But my greed really almost cost me. The fifth, I hope this works right, is envy. This is from the New Yorker. It's not enough that we succeed. Cats must also fail. Our envy makes us kind of mean. We want what he's got, and if we can't have it, it disturbs us. Now, I'll just give you 2 examples here. Back in November 2021 or 2022, I helped Seth move into his new house. Now, his old house was in my neighborhood, and it was a comparable kind of house that I was living in. I saw the new house for the first time, and I just gasped. I don't know how many of you have been out there. It's in Savoy. It's in the suburbs. It's one of those 2 levels. What are they called? It's a big house. My entire apartment would fit into their dining room and living room. And then I could go upstairs and do it again. And just for good measure, I could put my apartment in their basement. I mean, it's a mansion compared to what I live in. And for a little while, I was jealous. And I have to talk myself out of this. And I said, well, you're just one guy. You don't need 4 bedrooms. You don't need I mean, you just sort of do this self-talk that gets you out of the way that envy can sabotage us if we're not careful. Shakespeare wrote a sonnet that's interesting, and let's see, did I put it up? Yes. When in disgrace with fortune and men's eyes, I all alone beweep my outcast state, and trouble deaf heaven with my bootless or useless cries, and I look upon myself, and I curse my fate. I wish me to be more like one rich in hope, featured like him, with friends possessed, desiring this man's art, that man's scope, with what I most enjoy, contented least. Envy just kind of makes you unhappy with yourself. It separates you from God, and when we're separated from God, we're unhappy. There's no way around it. We're unhappy. The 6th sin is wrath. Now, wrath is pictured as a lion with a man on it in blood-stained clothes with rusty daggers in each hand, having fits of rage. I didn't want to put a lion up there like that. It was too ferocious for a Sunday morning. So we've got this lion here at peace. He looks kind of graceful, doesn't he? But he can get mean awful fast. Anger. We all experience anger. When I was married, favorite form of anger was, but I'm not angry. Any argument we had ended up being about whether or not I was angry. And I suspect I probably was. I don't know for certain, but I suspect I probably was. Anyhow, if my wife lost my keys, it soon became, why are you so angry? I'm like, because you lost my keys. But why is that making you so angry? Because I need my, it goes on, and your temper flares up. And once it does, it takes a while to settle back down. I've read it can take up to 8 hours for that kind of fit of rage to settle down where you're a rational human being that other people can talk to. So, it's not a good thing. We've got the war between Hamas and Israel, filled with rage. There is a civil war in Sudan. There is gang warfare in Haiti. There's me at four-way stops. I have worked so hard to not react when people run a stop sign or fail to, or just roll right through it. It makes me mad. It's unjust. And I used to honk at them. But then in 2008, there was an earthquake. I don't know if you remember. It was in the spring, and it shook things up. And what it did to my car was it made the horn go off continuously. And the only way I could stop it was to take the fuse out. So now I can't honk at people anymore. And between 2008 and 2000, well, it happened earlier. By 2020 or so, what's that, 12 years? I finally learned not to get too mad at four-way stops. I can still do it, but I don't want to. Finally, we have pride, and pride stands in contrast to humility. Let's see if I get this right. Pride is pictured as a peacock. Peacocks are proud birds, and they unfurl their feathers frequently to attract a mate. And you got to admit, that's pretty colorful. It's better than a pinstripe suit, which never did attract too many women to me. But it's considered a gateway sin because pride is behind every other one of the sins. It's behind idleness because you're pleasing yourself. It's behind gluttony because you're pleasing yourself. It's behind all the sins because it's the biggest sin of all. This is from Isaiah 14, verses 13 and 14. And God is speaking. He said, "For you have said in your heart, I will ascend to heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will also sit on the mount of the congregation on the furthest sides of the north. I will ascend above the heights of clouds. I will be like the Most High." God says, you can't do that. You cannot be me. And we know the story of Satan and his fall to being merely a snake in the garden. Well, what can we do? The thing I've read about this, and I think is true, is that you need to be mindful. We need to think our ways through our days and not do things automatically, not autonomously. There's a word for how our mind responds without particularly thinking about things. Yeah, subconsciously works, Judson. It's you just react without thinking. And by without thinking, we do things we shouldn't do, which is called sin. Remember the Lord your God. Deuteronomy 6:6-9 is interesting, and it always stops me, because I think, how do we do that today? These commandments that I give you today are to be on your hearts, Impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road, when you lie down and when you get up. In other words, all the time. Talk with your kids. Talk amongst yourselves. Tie them as symbols on your hands and bind them on your foreheads. Write them on the door frames of your houses and on your gates. And I think, well, how do people do that today? Luis Gill, he's a pitcher on the New York Yankees. He took Garrett Cole's place in the rotation when Cole was injured. When he was 15, he got that tattoo. God bless me. He said he got it because every time I look in the mirror, it reminds me, God has blessed me. That's kind of drastic, you think, but there's got to be something you can do. Maybe you wear a cross. Look at the cross. Remember what it stands for. Maybe you've got a picture in your hallway. Remember what it stands for. Look at it. Do things that help you to remember the Lord your God. Where's the citation? 1 Thessalonians 5:16 through 19 says, Rejoice always, pray without ceasing, give thanks in all circumstances, for this is God's will in Jesus Christ. Do not quench the Spirit. I really like that line, pray without ceasing. We all have a conversation in our heads. Have that conversation with God. Why not? He's there anyhow. Go ahead and have a conversation with God. Just be mindful. And then there's this, and I'll finish with this. So, if you think you're standing firm, be careful that you don't fall. Don't be proud. No temptation has overtaken you except what is common to mankind. Idleness, wrath, lust, they're all common to mankind, because women can do these too. And God is faithful. He will not let you be tempted beyond what you can bear. But when you are tempted, he will also provide a way out so that you can endure it. You can endure it, which is basically you can withstand it with suffering. It's not easy, but it can be done. And it's worth doing to remain in communion with God and to not be so removed from him that you don't feel like he's there even when he is. So God's grace is sufficient. If we confess our sins, he is faithful and just and will forgive our sins and purify us from all righteousness with his grace. Not with our works, but with his grace. Amen? Amen. Oh. Now is our time for communion. If you're in a relationship with God, you are welcome to the tables, which are prepared both there and and in front of me. So please join us in the Lord's Supper.
Change my heart, oh God, make it ever true. Change my heart, oh God, may I be like you. Sing that again. Change my heart, oh God, make it ever true. Change my heart, oh God, may I be like you. You are the potter, I am the clay. Mold me and make me, this is what I pray. Change my heart, oh God, make it ever true. Change my heart, oh God, may I be like you. You are the potter, I am the clay. Mold me and make me, this is what I pray. Change my heart, oh God, make it ever true. Change my heart, oh God, may I be like you. Absent from flesh, so blissful from what joy this moment brings. Freed from the blame my sin has brought, from pain and death and its sting. Absent from flesh, oh glorious day, in one triumphant stroke. My reckoning paid, my charges dropped, and the bonds round my hands are broke. I go where God and glory shine to one eternal day. This failing body I now resign, for the angels point my way. For the angels point my way. Absent from flesh, then rise my soul, where feet no wings could climb. Beyond the sky, where planets roll, beyond I'll keep up time. I go where God and glory shine to one eternal day. And this failing body I now resign, for the angels point my way. I go where God and glory shine to one eternal day. This failing body I now resign, for the angels point my way. 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 A thousand times I've failed, still your mercy remains. And should I stumble again, I'm caught in your grace everlasting. Your light will shine when all else fades, never ending. Your glory goes beyond all fame. My heart and my soul, I give you control. Consume me from the inside out, Lord. Let justice and grace become my embrace, to love you from the inside out. Above all else, my purpose remains, the art of losing myself in bringing you praise everlasting. Your light will shine when all else fades, never ending. Your glory goes beyond all fame. My heart and my soul, I give you control. Consume me from the inside out, Lord. Let justice and praise become my embrace, to love you from the inside out. Everlasting, your light will shine when all else fades, never ending. Your glory goes beyond all fame. And the cry of my heart is to bring you praise from the inside out. Lord, my soul cries out, everlasting. Your light will shine when all else fades, never ending. Your glory goes beyond all fame. And the cry of my heart is to bring you praise from the inside out. Lord, my soul cries out from the inside out. Lord, my soul cries out from the inside out. Lord, my soul cries out from the inside out. Lord, my soul cries out. Last song we're going to sing is Waves of Grace. And I was just reflecting on Ray's sermon, and there's a lot of sins in our hearts. We're very human, and God is very God, and there's a big difference between us. But, this song talks about the walls we're building up, but how God knocks it down with the waves of grace. And that was Ray's point at the very end, is the grace is what brings us into God and wipes out all these things that we just cannot do on our own. So let's sing this last song together. Stand with us if you're able on this last one. Waves of Grace. Walls are high, the walls are strong. I've been locked in this castle that I built for far too long. You have surrounded me, sea on every side. Cracks are forming and I've got nowhere to hide. Now I see the walls I built are falling and your waves of grace are washing over me. Now I see, walls I built are falling and your waves of grace are washing over me, over me. My heart's been hard, have been blind. I have often worked so hard to keep you from my mind. I have ruled my life, a palace built on sand. But I want you to reign, Lord, take me by the hand. Now I see, walls are built are falling and your waves of grace are washing over me, over me. Now I see, walls are built are falling and your waves of grace are washing over me, over me. Lord, please reign in every part. Give my life to you, I open up my heart. I want to be like you, I want to seek your face. Lord, please wash me in your awesome waves of grace. Now I see, walls are built are falling and your waves of grace are washing over me, over me. Now I see, walls are built are falling and your waves of grace are washing over me, over me. Now I see, walls are built are falling and your waves of grace are washing over me, over me. Now I see, walls are built are falling and your waves of grace are washing over me, over me. Now I see, walls are built are falling and waves of grace are washing over me, over me. Now I see, walls are built are falling and your waves of grace are washing over me, over me. We're just going to keep playing for a little while. If I can play the right chords. Thank you for worshiping with us. Stick around for the food pantry.